All right, it's getting to be that time of year where I need to really cut my hair. I guess we'll just embrace it for this video. Okay, so you guys know the thing. If I'm here recording videos in this attic of depression, I usually like to do a tier list. And that's just because I'm not really near any good recording environment, any of my usual gear. So we're going to do voiceover mics today. I've done budget microphones in the past. That was a generalist tier list. Guitar recording, drum recording, voiceover, vocal. It had to do it all really well. We've also done a vocal tier list just for vocal performance. This one is for voice, spoken word. I've got a few mics here. All of them, for the most part, are really good mics. So whenever we're talking about S tier and F tier here, we're kind of thinking within the bounds of the microphones I have selected here. F tier, in this case, is still pretty usable. And then S tier is beyond usable. It's amazing. Also, these tier lists that I build consider budget. I don't understand the ones that don't consider budget. That means a microphone that sounds amazing that costs $1,000 might rank the same as a microphone that sounds pretty good and it's $200. So with that, let's get started. I'm going to select an S tier, a C tier, and an F tier, which is what I always do to get started, kind of set the boundaries here, something to measure by. In S tier, I'm going to do something that I think is pretty hard to argue, and that is the U87 AI, a legendary microphone all around. It's a legendary microphone for vocals, for guitar, and for voiceover. You guys have all seen it, right? Whenever you see these behind the scenes videos on YouTube of your favorite animated show, they're all using a U87. There's a reason for that. Put it in a proper treated environment and it is the gold standard. So before we continue, check this out. The good folks over at The Ridge sent me this key holder. As you guys know, Ridge is primarily known for their wallets, but what I really like about Ridge is they provide a bunch of different solutions for living a minimalist lifestyle. They really help organize my day-to-day life and how I travel. I have a Ridge backpack, which I use every day, and I've been living out of for the last 3 weeks. Obviously, I have a Ridge wallet, and now I have the Ridge key case. You can hold up to 6 keys here, and they don't jangle around in your pocket. They're not lumpy in your pocket anymore, and they fit right on your keys. And everything Ridge makes is built extremely well. This is built to a high degree of precision. It's really rugged and really robust. Yeah, everything Ridge makes is just built to an extremely high degree of quality, and I love what they stand for, minimizing the amount of junk that you have on your person when you travel, and in general, maximizing the efficiency and precision you have with all the things that you have on your person when you travel. You can see here, I actually matched it to my wallet. Plus, they're an awesome company to work for. So if you'd like to support the channel, you can use the link down below for 10% off the key case, or you can use the code AudioHaze to get 10% off your purchase. Anyways, back to the video. Okay, for F tier, I might make some people mad here, but you guys kind of already saw it coming. Not a huge fan of the Rode Procaster. The Rode Procaster, to me, is not what a voiceover mic should be. Both the Rode Pod mic, which we'll get to, and the Rode Procaster both have relatively sculpted sounds that tends to give a lot of emphasis to the high end. And although for me personally, I do end up liking a lot of bright microphones on my voice because I have a pretty dark voice, for most people, I don't see a bright microphone making a very good voiceover microphone. To me, they need to be either flat or relatively dark. They need to handle sibilants well, and they can't grate on the ears for too long. High-end information to me gets a little bit grating, and the Procaster in particular sounds relatively tinny to me. In C tier, I'm going to put the Rode NT1 for a similar reason as the Rode Procaster. This is a bright microphone, but admittedly, it's a bright microphone that to me sounds a lot nicer than the Rode Procaster, not as tinny, but it is kind of glassy. It has that sibilance problem that a lot of brighter condenser microphones have, and to me, it kind of thins out the voice in a way that I don't prefer for spoken word. It's also not very good for room rejection. Whenever we're talking about a budget microphone like the Rode NT1A, that's something to consider. You know, you probably don't have the best room to work in if you're working with a, whatever, $150, $200 microphone. And again, that sibilance is a real issue for me. The one thing it does have going for it is an extremely low self noise. That really low self noise means it's entirely usable for voiceover if it happens to suit your voice. I just think it's not going to suit a lot of voices. So let's kind of even this stuff out. Let's pick an A tier. For A tier, I'm going to go ahead and pick I'm going to pick the TLM 102. For me, the TLM 102, and we're going to get to the 103 here in a second, is one of my favorite microphones for voiceover from Neumann. That is because to me, it's a lot more mid-range focused and a lot smoother, darker tone than a lot of other Neumanns. It still has a shelf in the high end. It has that kind of characteristic Neumann tone to it. But if you go back and listen to my review of it, or you check out some other reviews, it has a noticeably darker, more mid-range forward sound as compared to the TLM 103, which is a little bit brighter. And to me, for voiceover, I love the way that sounded on my voice. It was one of my favorite microphones I've tested on my voice. It is, however, extremely sensitive. You do need a shock mount for it, and it doesn't come with one, which is a major bummer. And it is not friendly to an unforgiving environment. So if you have the environment to house a 102, it's a brilliant voiceover microphone. High A tier for me, just not quite at the S tier level, personally. So for B tier, I'm gonna pick another one of my favorite microphones, and that would be the Luit. The Luit 440 is bar none, probably my favorite budget microphone. It is, however, extraordinarily bright. One of the brightest microphones I've ever tested. And if you're not into bright microphones, especially on voiceover, it's not for you. However, to me, it's not quite bright like the Rode NT1A is bright. It doesn't have the same sibilance issues. And in my experimentation, it's better for a condenser at rejecting the environment around it as compared to the Rode NT1A. If this was a tier list just for my voice, I would put the 440 higher. But I'm factoring in the general populace here and not just my particular voice. And for that reason, for most people, I think they'll find it's too bright. I'm going to knock it down to B tier. Nothing wrong with its tuning. I love its tuning, but for voiceover, a lot of people I think are going to find that their voice is too bright. In D tier, I'm going to put the AT2020. The AT2020 is a microphone that I really like the tone of. I know it's a little bit controversial. A lot of people don't like the tone of it. They say it's overly sculpted. Personally, I found a lot of nice, beautiful tonality in the mid-range, how they sculpted it there. Some people say it's too bright. I didn't find it to be overly bright for me. It is, however, an incredibly high self-noise, 20 dBA. When it comes to voiceover, specifically when you're not working with anything else in the mix, it's just your voice. You add on compression, you add on a high shelf EQing, maybe a little bit of harmonic saturation, all the things I normally talk about. All of a sudden, this thing is going to be, it's going to have a pretty harsh hiss. To be fair, when you're not talking, if you put a gate on it, you're probably not going to hear it. But when compared to some of the other microphones on this list that aren't going to have that problem, it gets knocked down a long ways down the tier list. So we've got an even amount for each one of these tier lists, which is where I wanted to start. Let's start adding on here. Let's start with something I think everyone probably expected of me and put the RE20, the mic I'm currently speaking into, in S tier. If I'm using a dynamic microphone, I don't have the option to use a condenser, and I often don't. The RE20 is my go-to voiceover microphone. It is, to me, the right amount of a little bit of tailoring to the sound, but for the most part, flat. It's not overly bright, it's not overly dark, it has good extension in both the low end and the high end. You have a much better time controlling proximity effect, not as dark and boomy if I get too close to it. It's not as dark as a lot of other voiceover microphones, which for my voice sounds great, and I think obviously on a lot of other people's voices it sounds great, considering it's been a radio icon for probably over 60 years now. Highly recommend this microphone. It is the top tier, S tier, #1 choice for voiceover with a dynamic mic. It is my de facto dynamic, and its usage across the channel should make that overly apparent. The Rode NT1, I'm going to put in low B tier. I love the NT1, specifically on acoustic guitar. It has a lot of the same problems as the NT1A, but with a better tuning for voiceover. It's not as bright as the NT1A. It's more mid-range focused than the NT1A. It still has the room rejection problems as the NT1A, and weirdly, it still has the sibilance problems as the NT1A. In some ways, it reminds me of the TLM 102, but not quite as smooth and as rich to me. It is, however, a wonderful generalist microphone, and in a lot of other categories, it excels, including self-noise. Again, an extremely low self-noise, making it more than capable in a lot of applications. Just put a de-esser on it, I suppose, and make sure you have an environment to deal with it. Now, don't kill me. I know I'm known for this microphone a lot, but I'm going to put this mic, the SM57, in low C tier. For a lot of the same reasons I've always talked about why the SM57 in these tier lists might end up lower than some of you guys expect. Remember, we're dealing with high caliber mics here. All of these, for the most part, are more than usable, and we're dealing with a high degree of proficiency here. But the SM57 is an S tier generalist microphone. For voiceover, you'll need to put a filter over it to make sure you don't get the plosives, because it has a Catman for instruments. And it's a brighter microphone. It has a little bit of a peak in like the 10 to 15K okay, which might bring out some sibilance depending on the voice. And for that same reason, the SM57 is essentially the same microphone. I'm going to put it in low B tier just for the sake of it's got a pop filter. It lowers down that brightness a little bit because of the pop filter, and obviously the pop filter will help with your voiceovers not getting the plosives. You know what? No. SM57 should be in low B tier. Being too critical of it. I'm just thinking if I'm gonna reach for a voiceover microphone, I'd actually reach for a 57 before an NT1A. So for that reason alone, I'm flipping it up to B tier. Let's do another A tier. In A tier, I'm gonna put what might be known as the voiceover budget king for me, the King B2. This microphone has an extremely low self noise, 6 dBA, $169, and for that price, you're getting one of the quietest microphones on the market, especially in this price range. You're getting one of the only condensers in this market that has a low mellow tonality, which I already stated was great for voiceover. Honestly, it's just one of the only condensers in like the sub $200 range I would consider for voiceover. For some reason, a lot of these condensers in this range tend to be rather bright, and this is just the opposite, super smooth. And if you're working in a video scenario, it is a marvelous set piece. It looks like it wants to be on camera for sure. Let's do some low tier microphones. I'm gonna put the MXL 990 in high D tier. To me, it sounds better than the AT2020, but it suffers from the same problem as the AT2020, that being the exact same self noise of 20 dBA, which means you're gonna get the same hiss and buzz if you process it too much on the 990. Avid critical listeners are gonna hear the hiss of it anyways. It also had some shoddy build quality whenever I tested it. Still a great sounding microphone, especially that price point, but in combination of the self noise for voiceover not being ideal and the build quality, it's gonna be in D tier, but above the AT2020. The Rode Pod mic, I'm gonna put I'm gonna put it in F tier. To be fair, admittedly, with the Procaster and the Pod mic, these are the mics I have the least amount of experience with on this list. But these microphones, to me, don't have the correct frequency response in tuning for a voiceover microphone. Peaky, bright microphones that have an overly tailored frequency response that to me, not every voice is gonna suit that. It's often thin and harsh on a lot of different voices. I know this isn't necessarily part of the test, but because of their highly tuned frequency responses, they're not going to be very versatile. They're only meant for a voice, and a very specific kind of voice at that. And I just can't get over the fact that a microphone that is actually meant and tailored for the voice is still a bright, peaky microphone. To me, the standard for a voiceover microphone is low, mellow, not harsh tones, so you can listen to it for a long time. And on that note, that is why the TLM 103 to me, although still brilliant, is not as good for voiceover as the 102. In a lot of ways, they have very similar tones, but it does have a noticeably brighter high end. It's a brighter, more sparkly Neumann that makes it great for vocals. It makes it great for standing out and sitting well and planted in a mix. But when it comes for voiceover, I just think that sparkle is not as nice and as tailored as the 102. They're both great, don't get me wrong. They're both Neumanns. They both deserve their name and their pedigree. And actually, on that note, the 103, and whenever I was testing that microphone, actually had better room rejection and was less sensitive than the 102. But for me, in terms of raw, pure tone, the 102 still pulls ahead of it. Now, let's talk about the voiceover microphone I actually use. If I'm in an environment that can host it, the OC818 is the voiceover mic I use whenever I do voiceover projects. It is S tier for me. It is a C414 improved in every way. Tonality wise, the C414 and the 818 are pretty similar, but it has a lot of different upgrades to it that make it, just to me, miles ahead, including build quality. The app control is really useful. It has a dual split output, so you can get stereo signals from it. The cage makes it much more resistant to RF noise, better at room rejection, and they've based the capsule off of the best golden years of the C414. It is what the C414 would be if the C414 actually advanced with the times. So on that note, the C414 is still one of my favorite microphones, but it's low S tier. Also, all the same benefits of the 818. just not done as well. Similar tonality, and for that reason, low S tier. Now, on both of these microphones, they kind of have a similar quality in some ways, a little bit brighter than the RE20, being a microphone that to me doesn't prioritize any one frequency range. It's tuned in such a way that has sort of a modest high-end boost and a very controlled mid-range that sounds very realistic and very strong and solid. Now, these are all very vague words, aren't they? But I kind of prefer those tones. You're gonna see I often prefer brighter microphones or microphones that don't bias low end too much, as I've already said. So let's talk about the microphone I just reviewed, the XM8500. It's a $20 microphone, but it got glowing reviews, didn't it? And for that reason, it's not in F tier, it's not in D tier. I'm gonna put it in high C tier, actually, just below the 57. The Behringer XM8500 for $20, remember, we're waiting price here, has no business being that good. It's a full metal mic that feels, for the most part, just as good as an SM58. It's a little bit dark and a little bit muddy, but for those reasons, if you tailor out the mud a little bit, control that low end with an EQ, you're left with a very good voiceover microphone. It's objectively a good, mellow, dark mic. It's easy to power for a dynamic microphone. For $20, it's just thrown above a lot of the competition on this tier list. Now, let's talk about the one that is just the most famous mic probably, period, at this point, at least in the world of the internet. And that would be the SM7B. I think on most people's tier lists, it would be somewhere in S tier. Hard to deny that. Just like the U87, it's hard to deny its legacy. In my tier list, it would be low A tier. It's still an amazing microphone, but for me, because of the fact that it's kind of hard to power, it's kind of misunderstood, to me it's overly dark. It swings too far in the other direction. I don't love it on my voice, but as I said before, this isn't just about me, this is the entire populace's voice. So here's my compromise. I've always been tough on the 7B, and I'm not gonna stop being tough on the 7B because I think it's a woefully misunderstood microphone. People glorify this mic too much. Maybe I hold that against it. But my compromise is high A tier. I cannot deny its influence, but I still think you need to bring up the high end for my ear to be happy with its tone. So that's my compromise, and that's my tier list. As I said, a lot of these are great microphones. A lot of them appeared higher on the tier list. None of these would be a horrible choice, except for maybe I wouldn't pick from D or F. But there you go. Hope that was helpful. If it was helpful, all of these microphones will be linked in the description. They're affiliate links. It really helps support the channel. So if this helped you make a decision, you're going to go buy one of these microphones, I'd really appreciate your support there. If you'd like, you can follow me on Instagram at RealAudioHaze. The Discord for all the audio nerds out there is in the link below, and you can work on a project with me by emailing me here. With that, guys, thank you so much, and I will see you in the next video. Hopefully not in an attic space. Goodbye.